Ethan Cole walked alone through the dust storms of Alaris 4, a world far from the bright centers of human civilization. The wind carried fine red sand that clung to his uniform, though the insignia had long been torn away. He was once a soldier of the Galactic Defense Corps, but that title meant nothing now. He had been cast out, branded a traitor for disobeying orders during the evacuation of the colony world Meridian Prime. He still remembered that day. The command had been clear: pull back and leave the civilians behind. The enemy fleet was closing in and there was no time, but Ethan could not leave them. He had stayed behind to help the trapped families escape through the maintenance tunnels. When the rescue ships finally came, most of them survived, but his defiance cost him everything. The Corps stripped him of rank, citizenship, and honor. To the galaxy, he was a failure. To himself, he was simply tired. Now he lived in exile. Alaris 4 was a forgotten world, used only for mining until the storms made it too dangerous. There were no cities, no people, just the sound of wind and the creak of his small shelter built from scrap metal and broken shuttle parts. Each morning he repaired what the storms had damaged during the night. Each evening he watched the twin suns sink below the horizon, painting the sky with colors he had no one to share with. He often spoke to himself, just to hear a human voice. He kept a small recording of a violin melody on an old data chip. It was the only thing he had kept from his former life. When the nights grew too quiet, he played it and watched the dust drift past the flickering light of his campfire. Alaris 4 was harsh but beautiful. Towering cliffs of crimson rock rose over valleys filled with silver mist. Sometimes, strange lights danced across the horizon. Ion storms that painted the sky green and blue. He had read stories about this world once, long ago. The settlers used to say that dragons lived in the mountains, creatures of fire and metal that vanished before humanity arrived. Ethan had laughed at the idea back then. Now, alone under the endless stars, the thought no longer seemed so strange. One morning, while searching for minerals to trade with a passing supply ship, he found a narrow path between two cliffs. The wind there was warmer, and the ground shimmered faintly with a glow beneath the dust. Curiosity guided him forward. The path led to a cavern half buried in stone. Its entrance was wide and shaped almost like the ribs of some giant creature. Inside, the air felt alive. The walls shimmered faintly, as if pulsing with a heartbeat. He took off his gloves and touched the stone. It was warm. Deeper inside, the cavern opened into a vast chamber lit by crystals that grew from the floor like glassy trees. In the center lay shapes that stopped him in his tracks. They were eggs, massive, metallic, and faintly glowing. Each one was taller than his chest, smooth and silver with faint blue veins of light running through the shell. There were 5 of them, resting in a bed of soft mineral sand. Ethan felt a strange pull in his chest as he stepped closer. He placed his hand on the surface of one egg. It was warm, not hot, not cold, but alive. A pulse beat beneath his fingertips. For the first time in years, Ethan felt something other than regret. Wonder. Awe. The realization struck him. Maybe the stories were true. Maybe dragons had once ruled here, and these were their last children. Forgotten by time, left to sleep until the world was kind again. He stayed there for hours, sitting in silence, listening to the faint hum of the cavern. He thought about leaving, but the idea of walking away felt wrong. The eggs were unguarded. If scavengers or miners found them, they would be sold or destroyed for profit. He could not let that happen. When he returned to his shelter, he looked at the worn insignia patch he had once torn from his uniform. He placed it on the table and stared at it for a long time. Then slowly he smiled, a small, tired smile. Maybe this time I can protect something that matters, he whispered. The next day he packed his tools, rations, and a few solar panels. He moved his camp closer to the cavern. The storms made it difficult, but he worked with patience, building a small shelter near the entrance. He set up motion sensors, solar batteries, and water collectors. He repaired an old drone to patrol the nearby cliffs. Every night, he returned to the cavern to sit by the eggs. Sometimes he spoke to them, telling stories about the stars and the people who lived among them. He did not know if the eggs could hear him, but he liked to believe they could. Days turned into weeks, and the isolation no longer felt like punishment. The silence of Alaris 4 became a kind of peace. The man who had once been a soldier, who had once been called a traitor, now found meaning in guarding something fragile and beautiful. And somewhere deep within the cavern, beneath layers of light and metal, the faintest movement stirred inside one of the eggs. The storms on Alaris 4 were growing stronger each day, but Ethan Cole no longer feared them. He had learned the rhythm of this world, when to seek shelter, when to move, when to listen. The sound of thunder rolling through the canyons no longer meant danger. It was a reminder that life still existed beyond silence. He spent his days repairing the small outpost he had built near the cavern. He fixed the panels that collected sunlight and cleared the sand that buried his equipment after every storm. Each night, he visited the eggs deep within the glowing cave. The hum of the crystals had become familiar, almost comforting. He had come to think of the eggs as his silent companions. Weeks passed. Ethan began keeping notes in a worn datapad, recording the patterns of light inside the eggs. He noticed that their glow changed slightly with the passing of each day, sometimes faint, sometimes bright like a heartbeat. The temperature of the cavern also shifted, rising and falling like a living system. The air carried a faint smell of metal and ozone, mixed with something warm and ancient. He talked to the eggs every evening, even though he knew no one could answer. He told them stories of his past, the battlefields, the laughter of his crew, the long nights aboard the ships that crossed the stars. He spoke about the mistake that had cost him everything, about the people he had tried to save. Speaking these words into the silence made the burden lighter. One night, while checking his sensors, he saw something strange. The readings from the cavern showed a surge of energy, a pulse stronger than any before. He rushed down the narrow passage, his boots echoing on the stone floor. When he reached the chamber, the crystals were glowing brighter than he had ever seen. The air trembled with soft vibrations, and the eggs shimmered with blue and gold light. He approached slowly, his heart pounding. The warmth he felt before had grown stronger. He placed his hand on the nearest egg and felt a faint movement from within, like a slow turn or a stretch. He stepped back, stunned. For the first time, he was sure the eggs were alive. Ethan spent the next days studying the phenomenon. The light continued to pulse in patterns, as if following a rhythm. He theorized that the eggs were drawing power from the crystals, perhaps even from the planet itself. He didn't know how long they had been there or why they had not hatched, but he felt it was not by accident. Something was keeping them alive, waiting for the right moment. He reinforced his shelter, added more defenses, and scavenged an old mining bot he found half buried in the sand. After several days of repair, it came back to life with a low hum. He named it Milo and programmed it to help him monitor the cavern's entrance. It was clumsy and slow, but it made him feel less alone. As time went on, he noticed other changes. The storms outside seemed to shift around the mountain more often, almost as if avoiding the cavern's area. The air inside grew calmer, and sometimes faint sounds echoed through the cave. Low, deep tones that resonated in his chest. Ethan wondered if the planet itself was aware of what was happening beneath its surface. One evening, while sitting near the eggs, Ethan found himself speaking more softly than usual. "I don't know what you are," he said quietly, his voice echoing, "but I think you're important. Maybe the last of your kind. Maybe something the universe forgot." He paused and smiled faintly. "Don't worry. I'm not going anywhere." In the following weeks, Ethan noticed the glow of one particular egg becoming stronger than the others. Its surface shimmered with streaks of light, and the hum in the air deepened whenever he was near it. He started to feel a strange warmth in his chest whenever he stood close, a gentle wave of calm, as if the creature inside recognized him. One night, during a fierce storm, lightning struck the ridge above the cavern. The ground shook, and part of the mountain collapsed near the entrance. Dust and debris filled the air. Ethan worked through the night to clear the passage, coughing from the smoke and grit. His arms ached, but he refused to rest until the way was open again. When the storm passed and the air cleared, the cavern glowed brighter than ever before. The energy field around the eggs pulsed with life. Ethan sank to the ground, exhausted but smiling. "You're still here," he whispered. "Safe and alive." He leaned back against the wall, listening to the faint hum of the crystals and the whisper of the wind outside. For the first time in years, he did not feel lost. He had found a reason to keep going. Far above, the twin suns rose again over the red cliffs of Alaris 4. Their light filtered through the dust and reached the hidden cavern, touching the eggs with golden warmth. And deep within the shell of one, something stirred again. Stronger this time, as if answering the promise of the man who guarded them. Ethan Cole woke before sunrise, his eyes opening to the faint glow of the storm-filtered light outside. Another day had begun on Alaris 4. He moved slowly, his muscles sore from the work he had done the day before. The cavern entrance was stable again, but he knew it would not stay that way forever. The planet had a temper. Every storm reminded him that he was a guest here. After a quick meal of dried rations, he checked his sensors and the readings from the cavern. The energy pulses were steady. The temperature remained constant. That was good. It meant the eggs were safe. He smiled slightly and whispered to himself, still holding on. The days on Alaris 4 had become a quiet routine. He repaired what the storms damaged, adjusted the solar panels, and cleaned the equipment of fine red dust that covered everything. But every evening, no matter how tired he was, he returned to the cavern. That place had become more than a shelter, it was a promise. The dragons, if that's what they truly were, needed him. He had no mission, no army, no orders. Only this duty he had chosen for himself. He sat by the glowing eggs, listening to the hum of the crystals. The air was warm and still. Sometimes he thought he could almost hear faint sounds from inside the shells, slow heartbeats or soft vibrations. He liked to imagine that they could hear him too. He spoke to them often, telling them about the stars, the ships, and the people who once filled his life. His voice was gentle, as if speaking to children. "Once, I believed duty meant following orders," he said one evening, his voice echoing softly in the chamber. "But I learned too late that duty is about doing what's right, even when no one is watching. Maybe that's why I found you. Maybe this is my second chance." The days stretched into weeks. Ethan repaired an old transmitter and used it to monitor nearby frequencies. He rarely heard anything except static, but sometimes faint signals passed by merchant ships or distant colonies. He never called out. He didn't want anyone finding this place. He didn't want the dragons to become another human experiment or profit venture. He began planting small patches of moss and algae in containers near his shelter, testing if they could grow in the planet's soil. The air filters provided some moisture, and the sunlight was strong enough. He had no illusions of building a garden, but it gave him something to do, something alive to care for besides the eggs. One afternoon, while scavenging near the canyon, he found the remains of an old mining outpost buried under sand. Most of it was useless scrap, but he recovered a working laser cutter, a damaged hover sled, and several power cells. He spent the next week repairing the sled. With it, he could transport more materials to strengthen the cavern's entrance. If anyone ever came looking for the energy source, they would find a fortress instead of an open door. Sometimes, at night, he looked up at the twin moons and wondered if the people who had exiled him were still alive. Did anyone remember his name? Did anyone care? The thought no longer hurt the way it used to. The stars were still beautiful. And here, among the storms and silence, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, peace. But peace never lasted long on Alaris 4. One morning, as he was checking the perimeter sensors, a soft alarm buzzed. Something large had entered the canyon below. Ethan grabbed his binoculars and climbed to a high ridge. Through the haze of red dust, he saw shapes moving, metallic, angular, and deliberate. Drones. Mining drones, likely from a salvage group. If there were drones, there were humans somewhere nearby. His heart tightened. If they detected the cavern's energy readings, they would come for it. And if they found the eggs, they would take them apart piece by piece. Ethan hurried back to his camp. He activated the camouflage netting over the entrance, adjusted the power output of his solar panels, and shut down his transmitter. He even dimmed the light around his shelter. Then he went into the cavern and sat before the eggs. "You're not alone," he said quietly. "I won't let them hurt you." That night, he stayed awake, watching the sky for signs of ships. Lightning flashed across the horizon, illuminating the edges of clouds like molten gold. The storm winds howled, carrying dust and thunder that shook the ground. It was both beautiful and terrifying. Ethan felt small beneath it all, but his resolve did not waver. In the days that followed, the drones passed through the valley and moved on. His readings showed their signal fading. Relief washed over him, but he knew it was only a matter of time before others came. The energy signatures from the cavern were too strong to stay hidden forever. He worked harder after that, building barriers, reinforcing the walls, and rerouting power from the crystals to shield the entrance. Every swing of his hammer echoed through the cave, mixing with the heartbeat hum of the eggs. He didn't mind the exhaustion. The work gave him purpose. One evening, as he finished his repairs, he looked at the largest egg. Its glow had deepened to a steady blue pulse. He placed his hand on it and whispered, "You'll be safe, I promise." He stayed there until the twin suns sank below the horizon, and the light in the cavern was the only glow left in the dark. Somewhere within the silence of the mountain, the faintest echo of his words seemed to answer back, a soft vibration, like a heartbeat in reply. Ethan Cole woke to the sound of distant thunder. It was different this time. Not the usual deep rumble of a storm, but something sharper, faster, mechanical. He stepped outside his shelter and scanned the sky. Through the haze of red dust, he saw faint lights moving, ships descending through the atmosphere. He felt his stomach twist. No one came to Alaris 4 without a reason. Whoever they were, they had found the energy readings from the cavern. He had known this day would come, but he had hoped for more time. He returned to his camp and checked the scanners. The signals were clear: 3 ships, small but armed. Corporate ships, judging by the signature codes. They were likely a private salvage team, maybe mercenaries hired to find rare tech. The energy from the dragon eggs must have drawn them like a beacon. Ethan moved quickly. He shut down all his power sources, covered his equipment, and activated the camouflage field. He packed his weapons, a plasma rifle, a pulse knife, and a few old grenades he had kept from his service days. His hands shook slightly, not from fear, but from memory. He had not prepared for battle in years. He knew what he had to do. He could not let them near the cavern. By midday, the ships landed in the valley below. Dust and sand swirled as the landing thrusters burned through the dry ground. Ethan watched from the cliffs above, his rifle steady in his hands. He saw men in dark suits step out, carrying scanners and weapons. Their leader, a tall man with a scar across his jaw, pointed toward the mountain. The scanners were already detecting the energy signatures. Ethan whispered under his breath, "You're not taking them." He moved through the canyons, using the terrain to stay hidden. He planted small charges along the narrow paths and ridge points, just enough to slow them down. The mercenaries began to climb toward the cavern, unaware that someone was watching. The first explosion hit as they reached the lower ridge. Rocks fell, blocking their route. Shouts echoed through the dust. Ethan moved silently, firing short bursts to keep them back. He knew he couldn't stop all of them, but he could buy time. Inside the cavern, the air trembled with energy. The eggs glowed brighter than ever, as if they sensed the danger. Ethan ran inside briefly to check them. The largest one pulsed rapidly, blue and gold light flashing through the shell. The hum was deeper now, almost like a voice trying to speak. "It's all right," he whispered, placing his hand on the smooth surface. "I'm here." He turned back toward the entrance as the sound of gunfire echoed closer. The mercenaries were advancing again, cutting through the rocks. Their leader's voice boomed through the comms. "Whoever's up there, stand down. This site is under corporate claim." Ethan didn't answer. He crouched behind a boulder and fired again, hitting one of their drones. Sparks flew as it crashed into the sand. The others returned fire, plasma bolts slicing through the air. He ducked, breathing hard. His armor was old, but it still held. The fight dragged on for hours. The sun dipped lower, and the sky turned a deep crimson. Ethan was running out of ammo. He had taken down 2 of their machines, but more were coming. His shoulder burned from a grazing shot. Blood soaked through his sleeve, but he ignored it. He could not stop. He could not fail. When night came, the mercenaries regrouped for a final push. Ethan limped back into the cavern. The crystals glowed brighter, lighting the space in pale blue light. He looked at the eggs, his vision blurring slightly. He smiled through the pain. "Guess this is it," he said softly. "If anyone's listening in there, live, that's all I ask." The leader and his team broke through the outer rocks. They entered the cavern, their lights cutting through the darkness. They froze when they saw the eggs. "What in the hell?" one of them whispered. Ethan stepped out from the shadows, his rifle raised. "You take one more step, and none of you leave this place alive." The leader sneered. "You're one man. You can't stop us." Ethan smiled faintly. "Watch me." He pressed a detonator on his wrist. Explosions roared through the tunnels above, collapsing parts of the ceiling. Dust and debris rained down. The mercenaries fired wildly as the ground shook. Ethan took cover and returned fire, taking down 2 more before a blast threw him backward. Pain exploded through his chest. He fell, struggling to breathe. He tried to stand, but his body refused. His vision dimmed. He looked toward the eggs one last time. They were glowing so bright now that the whole chamber shimmered with light. He reached out a trembling hand. "Stay safe," he whispered. The leader staggered forward, shouting orders, but before he could fire again, a wave of energy burst from the center of the chamber. The light was blinding. The air itself seemed to hum with power. The mercenaries screamed as their equipment overloaded, their suits sparking violently. Ethan felt warmth spread across his chest, gentle and calm. He smiled, the pain fading away. He thought he saw movement inside one of the eggs, a shadow stretching its wings. Then everything went white. When the light faded, the cavern was silent. The mercenaries were gone, reduced to scorched armor and ash. The air was still, and the crystals glowed softly again. Ethan lay near the nest, his hand resting against the smooth surface of the largest egg. Outside, the storm had cleared. The twin moons rose above the cliffs, shining on the entrance of the mountain. Inside, the hum of the cavern continued, a slow, steady rhythm, like a heartbeat keeping time for something yet to come. The storms of HFY faded with time. The valley that once burned with lightning and dust grew quiet again. The ruins of the mercenary ships lay scattered and forgotten, buried beneath layers of red sand. The mountain stood unchanged, but deep within its heart, the cavern still glowed with faint blue light. Years passed, then decades. The winds carried away all signs of Ethan Cole, the man who had fought and died to protect what others would have destroyed. His shelter rusted, his tools broke apart, and his name vanished from every surviving record. But within the cavern, something remained alive. The eggs had grown brighter over the years. Their shells pulsed with slow, rhythmic light, drawing energy from the crystals that surrounded them. The cavern had become a chamber of warmth, the air thick with quiet power. The hum that once echoed faintly was now a deep, steady song that filled the stone walls. One day, after centuries of silence, the largest egg began to crack. The glow inside it swelled and pulsed like a heartbeat. The shell split along lines of light, revealing a form within, sleek and shimmering, part metal and part living flesh. A low, musical sound filled the cavern, rising like a breath after long sleep. The creature unfurled wings that reflected the glow of the crystals, scales glinting silver and blue. A dragon had awoken. It blinked slowly, its eyes glowing with golden light. It looked around the cavern, as if remembering something. Its gaze fell upon the spot near the nest where a faint shape of human bones still rested, half buried beneath dust and time. Near them lay a broken data chip and a tarnished insignia patch. The dragon tilted its head and stepped closer. It lowered itself to the ground and touched the bones gently with its snout. A low hum came from deep within its chest, not of sorrow, but of memory. The creature did not know who the man was, but it knew the warmth he had left behind. It felt the echo of his presence in the stones, in the air, and within its own pulse. The other eggs soon began to stir. One by one, cracks appeared, and more dragons emerged, each different, yet all connected by the same soft glow. They spread their wings and looked to their elder, waiting. The first dragon raised its head and let out a low, resonant call that filled the cavern like thunder rolling through the stars. The dragons stepped into the open for the first time in centuries. The twin suns rose above the cliffs, bathing their metallic scales in gold. The air shimmered around them as energy rippled through the valley. The storms that had haunted Alaris for so long began to calm. The sky cleared, showing blue for the first time in living memory. The dragons took flight. Their wings cut through the thin air, leaving trails of light. They soared over the mountains, their cries echoing across the planet. They found the old ruins of human outposts buried in sand and stone. They found no one living, no cities, no voices. Humanity had long since moved on from this corner of space, leaving only ghosts of machines and memory. The eldest dragon, the one who had first awakened, landed on a high cliff overlooking the valley. It felt a strange emotion, a sense of purpose, almost human. The fragments of Ethan Cole's sacrifice lived inside it, not as words or thoughts, but as warmth. It remembered the protection, the promise, the kindness that had once filled this place. The dragons began to rebuild their world in their own way. They cleaned the cavern, reshaping it into a place of light and memory. They grew crystals into towers that hummed with energy, restoring balance to the planet's storms. They sang together at dawn, their voices blending into a melody that reached the farthest peaks. Time moved differently for them. Generations passed, though they did not count them. The eldest dragon became known among its kin as Vaelra, a name that meant guardian of warmth in the resonance of their speech. Vaelra kept the bones of the human protector undisturbed, a sacred place that none touched. When the young dragons asked about the remains, Vaelra would answer not with words, but with feeling. It would hum softly, and the others would feel the echo, the memory of light, courage, and a promise made in the dark. And so the legend began. In the endless storms of time, the story of the human who had guarded the nest became part of the dragon's very essence. They carried it in their wings and in their hearts. Each time a new dragon was born, it would feel that warmth, a reminder that once, long ago, a fragile creature had given his life so that they might live. Far above the clouds, where sunlight met the endless sky, Vaelra soared higher than the rest. It looked toward the stars, where distant ships now moved once again across the void. The dragon felt no anger, no fear, only calm. The warmth within its chest glowed softly, the same warmth that had once come from a man named Ethan Cole, whose courage had become eternal. And as the dragons flew, their wings shimmered with light that carried across the heavens, a silent song of gratitude that the universe itself seemed to remember. The world of Alaris 4 changed slowly under the care of the dragons. The storms grew calmer, the air clearer, and the sky brighter than it had been for centuries. The land began to heal. Where there had once been endless dust and ruin, small plants started to grow among the rocks. Life was returning to a planet that had been silent for too long. The dragons built their home among the mountains. The cavern where they had been born became a sacred place, a sanctuary of light and memory. Crystals grew taller and brighter, glowing with steady energy that pulsed like the rhythm of a heart. The eldest dragon, Vaelra, guarded this place with quiet devotion. It would often rest near the smooth stones that marked the grave of the one who had saved them. Vaelra carried more than memories. Within its heart, faint echoes of human thoughts stirred, feelings of duty, compassion, and sacrifice. These emotions were not natural to dragons, yet they had become part of them now. Ethan Cole's actions had left a mark deeper than any wound or scar. They had shaped what the dragons were becoming. Over time, they began to speak of him, though not in words as humans did. Their language was built from sound, light, and emotion, a harmony of meaning carried through the air. They called him the Warm One, the Protector, the last human of the nest. His story spread among them like fire in the wind. Generations passed. New dragons were born, each one carrying a small part of that ancient warmth within their hearts. They could not name its source, but they felt it guiding them, an instinct to protect, to create, and to remember. It became part of their culture, their way of life. Vaelra often flew across the planet, exploring the ruins that humans had left behind. The old metal outposts, broken towers, and silent machines told stories of a time when people had filled these skies. Some dragons feared that humans might one day return to claim what they had abandoned, but Vaelra did not. It believed that if they ever came back, they would not be the same. They too would have changed. One evening, as the twin suns dipped low, Vaelra stood upon a high peak and gazed toward the horizon. It closed its eyes and felt the hum of the planet beneath its claws. The air carried a whisper, a sound so faint that even the other dragons did not hear it. It was not the wind, nor the hum of crystals. It was something older, a memory. In that whisper, Vaelra felt Ethan's voice. Not in words, but in emotion. A quiet assurance, a reminder of the promise he had made long ago. "You're not alone." The dragon spread its wings and roared into the sky. The call echoed through the valleys, and the others joined in, their voices rising together until the whole world seemed to sing. It was a song of life, of connection, of memory, a tribute to the human who had given them a chance to exist. Over the years, the dragons built monuments of crystal and stone, shaped like wings stretching toward the sky. They placed them across the valleys, marking the places where Ethan had once walked, fought, and died. These monuments glowed softly at night, and the dragons taught their young that each light was a reminder of the warm one's heart. Vaelra, now older and larger than any dragon before, became the keeper of the legend. It spoke of the human not as a god, but as a symbol of what it meant to care beyond one's own kind. The story became part of every dragon's first lesson. When the hatchlings opened their eyes for the first time, they would hear the song of the warm one and feel his warmth in their first breath. Sometimes, during the quiet hours before dawn, Vaelra would return to the original cavern. It would lower its head and listen to the hum of the crystals. The air still carried the faint trace of Ethan's presence. It was not sadness that filled the dragon, but peace. Then one night, a strange light appeared in the sky. It was small and distant, moving slowly between the stars. Vaelra watched it with silent curiosity. It was not a meteor, nor a natural light. It was a ship. For the first time in many generations, a human vessel had entered the system. Vaelra did not roar or hide, simply watched, its golden eyes calm. The time of solitude was ending. The legend of the Warm One was about to be remembered by those who had forgotten him. As the ship's lights shimmered across the dark sky, Vaelra felt the warmth inside its chest pulse once more. It knew that whatever was coming next, the spirit of Ethan Cole would not fade. His kindness had outlived him, his courage had shaped a world, and his memory had become something greater than legend. And so, as the stars shone above Alaris 4, the dragons waited. Not in fear, but in hope. The story of the human protector would live on, not just in their hearts, but soon, across the stars again. The ship that entered the skies of Alaris 4 was small, old, and built for exploration. Its hull was scratched from years of travel through deep space. Inside, a small crew of 4 humans watched the screens as they approached the long-forgotten world. The leader of the group, Captain Laura Hayes, stood near the front window. Her dark hair was tied back, and her expression was calm but curious. "We're entering orbit," she said softly. "Alaris 4. No records of settlement for over 300 years. A younger crew member, Ethan's namesake, Jacob Cole, looked up from his console. "Captain, readings are strange. Energy signatures across the southern hemisphere, strong but natural. Not human tech." Laura frowned. "Natural? Or evolved?" Jacob hesitated. "It looks alive." The ship descended slowly, guided by thrusters that glowed faint blue. Through the clouds, the crew saw a planet that seemed both ancient and new. Vast plains stretched beneath them, broken by glittering mountains that shone with crystal light. Storms circled far to the north, but here the skies were clear and golden. "What happened here?" whispered Amelia, the ship's engineer. "It's beautiful." They landed near a mountain valley where strange towers of crystal reached toward the sky. The air shimmered faintly, carrying a soft humming sound that none of them could explain. The crew stepped out, their boots crunching on red sand and stone. Laura raised a scanner. "This isn't natural," she said. "These formations, someone shaped them." Jacob knelt near one of the glowing structures. "Captain," he said quietly, "this crystal, it's humming, like it's alive." The humming grew louder as the humans explored. They followed it toward the mouth of a wide cavern. The air was warm, and the light from within glowed like a heartbeat. When they stepped inside, they froze. Massive shapes moved in the shadows, sleek, metallic forms that gleamed in the light of the crystals. Dragons. Their wings reflected the glow, their eyes calm and watchful. The humans stared, awestruck, unable to move or speak. One of the dragons stepped forward. It was larger than the rest, its scales a deep silver blue. Golden light burned within its eyes. "Baelra." Laura's voice trembled. "Is that possible?" Jacob swallowed. "They shouldn't exist. None of this should." Baelra lowered its head, studying them with quiet curiosity. The air trembled as it let out a soft, musical sound that filled the cavern like a melody. The crystals responded, their glow pulsing in rhythm. The humans felt warmth on their skin, not threatening, but welcoming. Then the humming changed. The crystals near the center of the cavern projected faint light shapes, memories formed from stored energy. The humans watched as ghostly images appeared. A man in worn armor, carrying a damaged rifle, standing beside glowing eggs. A human face filled with exhaustion, yet gentle and kind. Jacob stared, unable to breathe. "That's a human. A soldier." Amelia whispered, "Is this history?" The images played out, the battle, the sacrifice, the storm. They saw Ethan Cole fighting to protect the nest, shielding it with his own body as the sky burned. Then the light faded, leaving silence behind. Laura turned to Jacob. "Cole," she said slowly. "Any relation?" Jacob nodded faintly, tears filling his eyes. "My great-grandfather was in the Frontier Corps. He disappeared during the Alaris campaigns. No one ever found out what happened." Baelra's gaze rested on him. It took a deep breath and released a soft rumble that shook the ground. The sound wasn't words, but emotion. A mixture of gratitude, remembrance, and peace. The humans felt it like a heartbeat in their chests. Jacob stepped forward carefully. "You remember him," he whispered. "You kept his story alive." The dragon inclined its head slowly, then extended one massive claw toward the crystal monuments at the cavern's edge. The humans followed, and there they saw symbols carved into the stone. Spirals of light and pattern that told a story even without translation. The story of a man who had stayed, who had protected, who had died so that others could live. Laura's voice was soft. "He became a legend." Baelra's wings opened, filling the cavern with light. Dozens of younger dragons stepped forward, their eyes fixed on the humans. There was no anger in their gaze, only curiosity, and something that felt like hope. For the first time in centuries, humans and dragons stood face to face. There were no weapons raised, no fear between them, only silence and shared understanding. Laura looked around the glowing cavern, her voice steady. "We need to record everything. The Alliance has to know what we found here." Jacob shook his head slowly. "Not everything. Some things should stay here with them." Baelra let out another deep sound, softer this time, a note that seemed almost like approval. Then it turned and looked toward the light outside the cavern. The other dragons followed its gaze. The world had changed again, and something new was beginning. As the humans returned to their ship, they looked back one last time. The dragons stood at the entrance of the cavern, watching as the ship lifted into the air. The hum of the crystals rose, and for a moment, the humans could almost hear a voice in the wind. "Thank you." Jacob closed his eyes, smiling faintly. "He's still here," he said. Laura nodded. "And now, the universe will remember him too." Above Alaris 4, the ship climbed higher into the blue sky. The dragons took flight below, their wings glowing with light that danced across the horizon. Together, human and dragon carried the same story forward, a legend reborn under twin suns. The stars above Alaris 4 shimmered brighter than they had in centuries. The human ship drifted in orbit, its engines silent, as the crew watched the planet below. The surface glowed with lines of crystal light, shaped like wings spreading across the land. From space, the dragon's work looked like an endless pattern of beauty and meaning, a living monument to the man they still remembered. Inside the ship, Captain Laura Hayes sat at the console, writing her final report. She paused often, looking out at the glowing world. Her voice recorder blinked softly as she spoke. "Mission report, Alaris 4. We have confirmed non-human intelligent life. Species classification uncertain. Native life forms appear to have been influenced by pre-settlement human contact, possibly through a single individual, identified by local legend as Ethan Cole. Based on evidence collected, Cole sacrificed himself centuries ago to protect an alien species during the collapse of the Frontier War. His legacy endures." She stopped recording and exhaled slowly. "Endures," she repeated, almost as if testing the word. Jacob stood near the observation window, staring down at the planet. "Captain, when we go back, they'll want to study the dragons. Maybe even take samples." Laura shook her head. "Not if we tell them the truth, the full truth. This isn't a world to claim. It's a world to protect." Jacob smiled faintly. "My great-grandfather would have liked that." They remained silent for a while, watching as the first rays of the twin suns touched the horizon below. The planet seemed alive in the light, its skies filled with shimmering wings. The dragons were flying again, soaring in vast circles over the mountains and valleys. Their voices, low and melodic, carried even through the vacuum of space, translated into gentle pulses of energy that touched the ship's sensors. Amelia, the engineer, turned from her screen. "They're sending something," she said softly. "A pattern in the signal. It's repeating." Jacob leaned closer. "What is it?" Amelia smiled. "It's music. A song." The melody was simple but beautiful, a slow rhythm that rose and fell like a heartbeat. The crew listened in silence, and for a moment, they all felt the same warmth that the dragons carried within them. It was a song of memory and gratitude, of life continuing after loss. Down on the surface, Vaelra watched the ship move across the sky. The great dragon stood on the peak of the highest mountain, its wings folded, its golden eyes reflecting the stars. Around it, younger dragons sang softly, adding their voices to the chorus. The air shimmered with light, and the crystals of the planet resonated in harmony. Vaelra closed its eyes and remembered. It saw the man who had once stood where it now stood, the man with the tired eyes and steady hands, who had spoken softly to the eggs, who had faced death without fear. It felt his warmth still, like sunlight in its chest. That warmth had become the heart of their world. Centuries had passed, and yet, his kindness still lived in every breath they took, every flight they made, and every melody they sang. He had not only saved them, he had changed what they were. He had given them a sense of purpose that went beyond survival. He had shown them love. Vaelra lifted its wings and took to the sky, flying higher than ever before. The air thinned, and the stars grew closer. The ship above glowed faintly in orbit, a distant reflection of the world below. The dragon circled once, then released a long, soft roar, a farewell that echoed across the heavens. Inside the ship, the sound reached the crew as a vibration, a pulse of energy that carried meaning beyond words. It was a message of peace, of trust, and of remembrance. Jacob whispered, "He's saying goodbye." Laura nodded. "No," she said quietly. "He's saying thank you." The ship began its journey home. As it pulled away from Alaris 4, the dragon's song followed them through space, fading slowly into the silence of the stars. Weeks later, when they returned to the Alliance core worlds, the story spread quickly. Scientists debated, historians argued, and politicians struggled to understand what had been found. But among ordinary people, one truth took hold: the tale of a man who had been left behind, who had given his life for creatures no one else cared about, and who had become immortal through their memory. Schools named after Ethan Cole appeared. Poems and songs were written. Artists painted the twin suns of Alaris IV and the shining dragons that soared beneath them. For the first time in generations, humanity remembered what it meant to be more than conquerors. They remembered what it meant to care. And far away, under those same suns, Vaelra and its kin continued to fly. The planet thrived under their watch. The mountains glowed brighter each year, the skies clearer, the songs louder. The dragons had no temples, no statues, no prayers. Their only worship was in the warmth they carried and shared with one another. That warmth had begun with one man, long ago, in a dying world. And though time moved on, and stars shifted in the endless dark, the warmth of Ethan Cole, the banished warrior, never faded. It lived on in the beating hearts of dragons and humans alike, a bridge of light between two species, and a legend that would never die.